Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a content marketing expert and an author from Florida, USA, Mr. David Ebner. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. David is the president and founder of Content Workshop, which is a story-first content marketing agency. He's an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Kingmakers, a content marketing story. So, David, before we get into Content Workshop, my first question is, what sparked your interest in storytelling during graduate school, and how did that evolve into a business idea?
Wow, that goes back so much further than graduate school because I studied what I would call classical storytelling in school, right? So I have a an undergraduate degree in English with a concentration in creative writing, and I went to graduate school to get my master in fine arts in creative writing.
Hmm.
So overall, it's always been a spark there for me, and storytelling has always been kind of like a way for me to have an artistic expression of what's inside my mind, right? I think writing is a thinking exercise. It's to like lay out all the thoughts onto paper and kind of get them out of the mind. So when I was in graduate school studying that, I started to realize some of the correlations between creative storytelling, the fine art of storytelling, and commercial storytelling, and the two were very aligned. So at the time, brand storytelling wasn't a big term thrown around. This was 2013. So I started to freelance under the term content workshop because people would hire a company before an individual. So it's just me all by myself
Yeah,
freelancing.
yeah, yeah.
And I found that correlation and all that creative energy that I had for the art of storytelling translated really well in
Mhm.
the business sense. So it was just kind of product market fit.
Wow, wow. And what challenges did you face while turning a collective of storytellers into a formal agency?
Yeah, this was really tough because the transition, let's call it, of artistic storytelling and commercial storytelling isn't something everybody can do, right? I know many writers who are far better creative writers than I am,
Hmm.
who just simply have a hard time putting kind of their art in a box, let's call it, but kind of putting boundaries on their art so that it fits a commercial objective,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of people have a hard time making that transition. So we actually built a bunch of training resources for those people. We built them during COVID, actually. We built a whole series of classes we called EDU for creative writers and creative artists, designers as well, who wanted to make that move over. And we gave away those courses for free. But still, there's still some blockage for some people, and that's
Hmm.
perfectly acceptable. It's just not for them.
Right. Your book, Kingmakers, became an Amazon bestseller. What inspired you to write it, and how did it impact your career?
Yeah, a lot of it was just that exercise of getting the thoughts out,
Hmm.
get them out of my mind, right? Organize them on paper, and allow for me to kind of build connection from one thought to the next.
Hmm.
Overall, though, it's autobiographical to a degree, right? It is a story. It's my story of going through the process of making that transition from creative endeavors to commercial endeavors
Hmm.
and kind of hoping to build a roadmap for other people who might want to take the same path.
Hmm.
Um, I I have a saying that my friendship is always free around here, and I just want to help as many people as possible
Hmm.
who are interested in bringing that spark of creativity to commercial marketing.
Hmm. Amazing. Let's now shift gears and talk about Content Workshop. David, what does story first mean in the context of content marketing?
Yeah, we get that asked that question a lot because we put it on the front page of our website, right, the homepage.
Hmm.
Um, we believe that marketing should always start and end with the story of the brand.
Hmm.
We think a lot about tactics. We think about email, we think about social, we think about content, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
However, all of that bakes down into building a relationship between the individual viewer, the audience, and the
Hmm.
brand itself. And there's no better way to build that trust and relationship than through storytelling.
Hmm.
It's how we've been building trust in relationships since the beginning of time.
Hmm.
So we really do believe it's an important aspect of marketing. So
Hmm.
when we say story first, what we really mean is like, let's talk about the audience and let's build the content around the audience because every
Mm,
good brand story is about the people the brand is helping, not about the brand themselves.
mm.
So that's our take on story first
Amazing.
content.
Amazing. And what are the key steps content workshop follows from concept to publishing?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time actually even before concept, right? We spend weeks with our clients typically.
Mm.
Now, actually, that's been sped up with AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
nauseam. But what we try to do is really understand the audience, understand their pain points,
Mm.
understand how the brand solves the pain points and what the outcomes are for
Hmm.
the audience. That kind of mathematical equation is the starting point for all great content. And if unless we know what those things are,
Mm.
we can have all the greatest ideas in the world. It's not going to deliver on page.
Yeah.
So once we figured out all of that, then it does come down. The process starts with an idea, and there's many ways ideas come to us. As we work with clients, we bring ideas to the table, they bring ideas to the
Mm.
table. It's always a collaborative effort. We call ourselves a workshop for a reason because it's very
Hmm.
much that kind of concept that working together, we can build something greater.
Mm.
we
Amazing.
we work through those, yeah, through those brainstorm ideas. And once we have the idea down on paper and we have a good outline, we're
Hmm.
already 90% of the way there. We think of our skill set as like writing or designing the content, but really the
Mm.
skill set, everything that happens before the pen ever hits the paper or the first key is ever struck.
Fascinating. And how do you ensure consistency in brand voice when working with multiple writers and clients?
Yeah, that work on the front end that I just mentioned is imperative to that. We actually today we always have built these massive knowledge bases for our writers, for our designers, for our internal team that's working for a brand, and that's influenced by every conversation we've had with that brand.
Mm.
Every meeting we've attended, we used to take notes. Now we have transcripts, and now we have AI overviews, right? In addition to that, in this new world that we live in, we build custom GPTs for all of them.
Mm.
If
Mm.
nothing else than to query, right? We might not use it to actually write some content. Maybe we
Mm.
do if we can get
Mm.
it to that point. But inevitably, we have a base of knowledge that we have to keep tapping into and put
Yep.
ourselves in that frame of mind before we ever start working for that client. And we
Mm.
make that available to anybody who's working on the account.
Mm. Amazing. And how do you approach narrative content strategy in the age of shrinking attention spans?
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a different take on
Hmm.
this. Yeah, I I think attention spans may not be shrinking as much as our tolerance for things that we don't like
Mm.
is shrinking.
Yeah.
So I here in the U.S. people binge content all day long, right? They watch Netflix for
Yeah.
hours. They'll watch YouTube for hours, whatever it is. They'll read an entire book from cover to cover. I mean,
Mm.
if attention spans are decreasing, then those shouldn't be happening. There's
Correct.
a correlation there, right?
Yeah.
However, when we're consuming content we don't like, we're
Mm.
less likely to give it a chance. We're
Mm.
much more likely to have our attention be shifted to something else that's shiny and exciting that
Mm.
will hold our attention more than spend it on that item. So what you have to do in that world is you have to constantly be providing value.
Mm.
That you never produce a piece of content that you're unsure as to who this helps and how it helps them.
Mm.
If you're producing content that is just information that doesn't really help anybody, that's wasting time, and that's where you're going to lose that attention span pretty fast,
Mm.
right? So doubling down on value for a target audience is always going to be the way to go.
Mm. I never thought of what you were just saying, that attention span is maybe just shifting focus from books to something else, but attention span is not reducing. Great observation. Thank you.
Mhm.
My next question, David, is how do you educate clients who still see content as a cost rather than a strategic investment?
We used to spend a lot of time on this.
Mm.
We started the company 13 years ago, and I'd say things shifted probably 5 years ago or so, maybe six, where we had to stop explaining that to people. But people seem to understand the value of content
Yeah.
more.
Mm.
Over time, they started to realize its ability to help build a brand, its ability to bring clients in
Mm.
because they themselves, the individuals, the executives were consuming content. They're like,
Mm.
oh, we should be doing this, right?
Yeah.
There's some moment of shift there. But we used to spend hours convincing people to spend money on this. Again, we don't have to do so much, but we always have to defend for budget. right?
Mm.
Oh, like you're essentially being pulled in different directions. Where should the
Yeah.
budget go?
Mm.
And you know, content creation is a lot about discovery.
Correct.
Like there is very hard to draw attribution
Mm-hmm.
usually, and your attribution model is usually a touch somewhere along the way,
Mm.
right? So if you don't have a multi-touch attribution model, content's going to seem like a pointless
Mm.
endeavor. However, you can draw a straight line sometimes to pieces of content, obviously attracting people to your brand. And the
Mm.
relationship between a brand and an individual has to start somewhere. You can have the
Mm.
best advertising campaign, the best whatever tactic. However, if you can't start that relationship and start building that trust, it's never going to matter. So
Mm.
that's usually how we talk about it. It's, you know, it's part of a cycle, it's part of a spend.
Yeah.
But you know, content is leads and sales, shoot, 3, 6, 12 months from now. It's not
Mm.
3 days from now or you know, or
Correct.
3 weeks from now.
Correct.
So we have that conversation a lot for sure.
Amazing. When I was reading about you and preparing for this conversation, I was also fascinated to see that you help B2B companies. And a lot of B2B companies struggle with storytelling. How do you help them overcome this problem? And give me an example. I don't want to names, of course.
Yeah, you know, we usually when we start working with smaller companies, especially larger established companies understand this to a degree because at some point in time they had to make this transition
Hmm.
to be more and more successful.
Hmm.
But a lot of times brands want to think that their initial brand story is about the founder. And then they usually make a shift that because the founder had an idea, right? The founder, the leader had some sort of idea to bring to the market. You know, they were really good at delivering it. They had a differentiation and they started delivering it, and then the company grew from there. So they make the story about that.
Hmm.
At some point in time, they start to realize, well, it can't just be about one person because we are many people, this
Hmm.
company, this organization. So then they start to make it about the company and the brand. And at some point in time, they'll make the shift or understanding, or we try to help them make the shift to
Hmm.
understanding that the story is not about the brand. The story
Yeah.
is about the audience, about
Hmm.
the people that they are
Hmm.
helping. It's the traditional hero's journey storytelling tactic where you make the story about an individual who's going through something, whose life is becoming better,
Hmm.
and you allow the people who are reading it and seeing it to transpose themselves into that individual so that they feel like they can also have the same outcomes as that
Hmm.
as the brand does. So
Hmm.
we make that transition over time with discussions, but the stats don't lie, right? The
Hmm. Hmm.
brands that produce content that's more about the audience perform
Correct.
better than brands that
Correct.
don't.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got the next few questions are on AI, and we referred to AI when we started our conversation. In your view, how has artificial intelligence enhanced or disrupted authentic brand storytelling?
Yeah, so that's an important term you threw in there at the end, the authentic word. Is it authentic if it's no longer being created
Mm.
by the minds and the people delivering the product and solution, the brand itself, right?
Mm.
I think it can be. I think it still it requires usually a lot of editing and human touch.
Mm.
AI is really just all about finding the right balance for me, the
Mm.
right balance between where the human and the machine can work together, right? We say human led, machine fed, right? Around here, which is that we can utilize these tools to get that story across and still make it authentic.
Yeah.
The problem that a lot of brands face, I think, is they just get fixated on volume. And when you start to fixate on volume, you start to produce a ton of content, which most likely has not gone through the creative and quality vetting that you usually put content through,
Hmm.
and you start to then build inauthentic experiences for your audience, and it starts to erode trust with
Mm.
them.
Mm.
So I think if you use AI more for the ability to produce a higher scale at higher scale quality,
Hmm.
then you're fine. Because if you think about it this way, I think about it as a funnel, right? Like the more stuff you put in the top, the more that is likely to come out the bottom. So if
Correct.
now with AI we have the ability to create tons of content, we can now spend more time and human energy maybe
Mm.
on focusing on differentiating all the things we've created as what's quality enough to go out the door and how do we turn
Mm.
them into speaking the way that the
Mm.
brand speaks.
Mm. Great response. And do you believe human creativity will remain at the core of content creation despite enhancements or advancements of AI?
Yeah, I really do. And for a couple of reasons. One, AI was created by human creativity. So it in and of itself is amplifying the potential for human creativity. The question is in the individual whether they're going to surrender their creativity to the tool or apply their creativity to the tool and then maximize effort, right?
Mm.
I do believe it will. Humans are creators. That's what we do. That's why we're
Correct.
here. No
Mm.
one is here just to sit back and have Mai Tais brought to them with little umbrellas in them. But, that would be nice too.
Mm.
But,
Mm.
that's
Mm.
not why we're here. We're here to create. We're here to explore. We're here to learn and grow.
Mm.
So that being the case, like we will never let go. We won't hand off the reins of that as individuals. And
Yeah,
I think that's a good thing because that's where we get diversity.
correct.
Diversity of thought is the mother of invention,
Mm.
right? Like how do we come up with new things if
Mm.
no one is saying something new or creative?
Mm.
Yeah, I don't worry about that too much. I think it's easy to go down that rabbit hole and
Mm.
get concerned.
Yeah.
But just my experience, my human experience has led me to believe that we're not going to let go of those reins.
Mm. That is so right. I've often been asked, do you use Chat GPT when you write? And I said, yes, I do. So then where's the creativity? I said, well, I used to use Google for my research. Now I
Yeah.
use Chat GPT and it's more precise.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, exactly.
you're absolutely right. My next question, David, is what should brands watch out for when they integrate AI tools into their content strategy?
Yeah, I would be very intentional about workflow.
Hmm.
Um, as much as we focus very much on the strategy and kind of the ideas, we still have to get down to the tactics and operations
Yeah.
of things quite a
Hmm.
bit, right?
Hmm.
So when I say workflow, I would just be on the lookout for when you choose to put human in the loop. I think
Hmm.
that's really it, and make sure that your AI tools aren't making decisions that you yourself need to make
Hmm.
or you want to make. Don't take yourself out of the loop if you don't want to be out of the loop,
Yeah.
first and foremost, right? If there's a part of content creation that you enjoy doing, don't automate it. Because your best quality comes out when you're excited about it.
Correct.
When I've read, I don't know how many blogs written by our staff
Hmm.
here,
Hmm.
right? You can tell instantly when somebody is not excited about a topic. You can tell right away.
Hmm.
And when they are, you can tell the same, right? So don't take yourself away from the aspect that gets you excited.
Hmm.
Put human in the loop where very important and business critical decisions need to be made. And keep the rest of your team engaged and excited as well too, because I think a lot of people are concerned about their jobs being
Hmm.
eliminated
Yeah.
due to these efficiencies, and that's going to happen. That's
Hmm.
inevitable.
Hmm. Hmm.
However, that doesn't mean that we should relegate every aspect of the campaign.
That is so true. My next question is that do you think content marketing trends are overrated or even misleading?
Oh, trends are overrated or misleading.
Hmm.
Yeah, as much as I don't want to say yes, right? I
Hmm.
like to be a positive individual.
Yeah.
But there's certainly some that are overrated and misleading. I think
Hmm.
more or not we get tied into or pulled in by flashy, exciting tactics,
Hmm.
and we don't focus on the underlying strategy of what we're trying to accomplish. Those things in marketing have never changed.
Hmm.
You hear today about SEO now being overrated,
Yeah.
and I don't agree. And the reason I don't agree is the bedrock of SEO is the same bedrock of AI, which is
Hmm.
people are searching for information and education,
Yeah.
and they're going to find it somehow, and some brand is going to produce it. And as long as you're the brand producing those value-based pieces, you are going to be found. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter how the algorithm changes, it doesn't matter what tactic comes out next, as long as you're doing that value level creation of marketing assets,
Hmm.
it's not going to matter what tool
Hmm.
people come to you through. Um, so, I, I get less turned away by the new flashy tools that either work or don't work, or these
Hmm.
statements that everything is this or nothing is that. And if you just focus on the underlying factor of why marketing works, you're never going to
Yeah.
be led astray.
Absolutely. I have time for two more questions for you. How do you recruit and nurture classically trained storytellers in a tech-heavy marketing world?
Yeah, we still do the same thing we've always done, which is we ask people who we know that are good at it if they know anybody else that's good at it. That's how we recruit. I mean,
Yeah.
trust is everything. If we're
Correct.
going to put somebody in front of a client, we
Mm.
have to have trust. And if we trust this other staff member and they say they trust that person, then I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
and run them through the paces, as it were.
Mm.
But yeah, we have a lot of referrals is how we find people. Every once in a while, we'll shoot out a job description on LinkedIn looking for
Mm.
people. It'll get filled up in a matter of seconds, and I'll,
Yeah.
I'll spend hours sifting through applications. But when it comes down to it, we've had way more success finding people who are like us, which are
Mm.
people who are artists, people who went to graduate school. We still have a whole network of people we went to graduate school with. Some of them we brought on board. We've
Yeah.
got 7 or 8 people that I went to school with that work here.
Mm.
And then they've all been a part of other programs and they know other people. And kind of like the group just keeps growing.
Yeah.
So we look for people who obviously have the skill set, but maybe don't have the experience. That's
Mm.
kind of like our target. It's like you might have done this really well, but not in this way. And usually that's where the nurturing and the training comes into play. And
Mm.
almost everybody who works here has a master's degree or a PhD. So
Mm.
they're naturally also educators. So
Fascinating.
we really enjoy
Yeah.
that process of
Yeah.
nurturing those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine what your office must be looking like, buzzing with stories and people talking to each other about what's happening. My last question for you. Can you share a case study where storytelling directly contributed to your client's revenue growth or audience loyalty?
Yeah, there's so many of them. I'm trying to think of one that might not be something I have to share the brand name for it to make sense, right? Well, I'll talk about one that's a little bit different. We worked
Mm.
with a horse racing farm. They
Mhm.
raised horses, thoroughbreds
Mhm.
to raise in Kentucky, here in the U.S., where it's very prominent. That's where the Kentucky Derby is. But they came to us because they had a fantastic brand story, and they wanted to know if content could help them attract more people to their brand. And
Mm.
we're talking about what an odd buying cycle, right? I mean, buying a racehorse is extremely expensive.
Mhm.
Boarding your racehorse is extremely expensive. So
Yeah.
although you do it usually as an individual, you make those purchase decisions kind of as a business.
Mhm.
So it's like B2C, B2B mix. There's a lot of
Mhm.
emotion
Mhm.
involved, a lot of
Mhm.
risk, and somewhat, I won't call it gambling, but there's
Mhm.
a lot of risk, and there's a lot of attention and time involved. So we worked with them. We built tons of content. We actually redesigned their website too, so that it
Mhm.
would be a story first website,
Mhm.
and developed tons of content for them. Attracted more audience. We ranked on all the different metrics. Right, we ranked number one on multiple terms that were interesting for them,
Mhm.
and started to fill their funnel with leads. Because with a company like that, the buying cycle could be years,
Yeah.
right? And over time, they saw massive growth in revenue for their services.
Wow. Great story. And on that note, David, thank you so much for speaking to me. What an amazing journey you've had. And, you've shared some amazing thoughts with my viewers and listeners about content marketing, about content, about how technology, uh, to use your words, is human-led, machine-fed. I love that four-word phrase. Thank you so much for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.